Let's get started. Welcome to another lecture. Today we turn our attention to a small creature with a very large footprint. Ants, Formicidae. I am Alexei, and with me is Priyanka. Together we will attempt to make order out of several million very determined insects.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I guess we can start by thinking about why ants matter so much, and also what exactly makes an ant an ant.
Let's begin with the foundations. Ants are eusocial insects in the family Formicidae within the order Hymenoptera. It's important to understand that eusociality entails three pillars: cooperative brood care, overlapping generations, and a reproductive division of labor between queens and workers. This architecture is not mere trivia. It is the engine of their ecological success. Taxonomically, we observe that ants evolved from vespoid wasp ancestors and are closely related to bees. In 2013, evidence placed ants near Apoidea. More recent syntheses integrate living and fossil forms into a broader clade, sometimes termed Formicopoidina, which includes Formicoidea and Apoidea. The exact ranks remain under active study, but the kinship to stinging wasps and bees is well supported.
Can we say that there's a quick way to recognize an ant if we only have a second to look?
Yes, elbowed antennae, a distinctive constricted waist with one or two node-like segments called the petiole, and, uniquely among Hymenoptera, metapleural glands on the mesosoma. That is to say, an ant is a chemical factory with legs. Colonies typically consist of sterile female workers, sometimes polymorphic, with soldiers having enlarged heads and mandibles, fertile males, and one or more queens. Only the reproductives are winged during mating periods. After nuptial flights, queens shed their wings and begin the long arithmetic of founding.
Building on that, why should we care? What is at stake ecologically?
In this context, the stakes are large. Ants occupy nearly every landmass except Antarctica and a few inhospitable islands, and their abundance peaks in the tropics. A 2022 synthesis estimated roughly 20 quadrillion individuals, with a biomass of about 12 megatons of dry carbon, exceeding that of wild birds and mammals combined. They turn soil, disperse seeds, regulate arthropod populations, and act as mutualists and antagonists across food webs. It is worth noting a historical confusion. Termites were once colloquially dubbed white ants, but they are Blatodia, closely allied with cockroaches. Their social systems are convergent, not homologous. Velvet ants likewise are wasps, not ants. Nomenclature is a treacherous teacher.
Moving on. Maybe we can ground this with a couple of basic facts and a short timeline.
Fundamentally, more than 13,800 species are described, perhaps 22,000 in total when the dark corners are counted. And colonies function as superorganisms, a term that is not metaphor here. The colony allocates labor, regulates temperature and humidity, mounts collective defenses, and forages efficiently without centralized control. The algorithm is local. The output is global order. Chronologically, mid-Cretaceous amber reveals stem ant groups such as Sphecomyrmini and Hydomyrmecini, wasp-like in several respects. By the late Cretaceous, roughly 70 to 80 million years ago, modern subfamilies appear. Around 60 million years ago, during the angiosperm terrestrial revolution, ants diversify and assume ecological prominence. In Oligocene and Miocene deposits, ants constitute 20 to 40% of insects. The fossil signal confirms what anyone who has dropped a cookie crumb already suspects.
I've been wondering about this. Do you remember a moment that made you care about ant behavior specifically?
Before we get to the complexities, a brief anecdote. Many years ago, I watched a tandem run of temnothorax on a sunlit stone. The leader adjusted speed every time the follower fell behind. Mathematically, it was a beautiful feedback controller, implemented by two brains the size of commas. I have been partial to commas ever since. This brings us to three large questions. First, how did eusociality evolve in ants? Second, a counterfactual. What if ants lacked metapleural glands and thus their chemical antisepsis? Third, what are the ecological consequences of ant supercolonies?
I think the next thing we should talk about is that first one, the jump from solitary to eusocial. How do we even frame that transition?
To frame our discussion, we consider incremental steps favored by selection: nest building, progressive provisioning of larvae, maternal care extended to older offspring that then assist with brood, and daughters delaying reproduction to help. If relatedness and ecological constraints render help more productive than solitary founding, the scaffolding of eusociality is erected. Classic work by E.O. Wilson and many others integrated behavior, ecology, and population genetics here. Whether one emphasizes kin selection or multi-level selection, the data converge on cooperative care and division of labor as fitness enhancing in the environments where ants thrived.
How does eusociality benefit ants in day-to-day terms? Like, what does a colony gain that a solitary insect cannot match?
In simpler terms, parallel processing. Thousands of workers distribute tasks. Young workers care for brood. Older ones undertake risky foraging. The colony engineers stable nest microclimates, coordinates via pheromones to find shortest routes, and mounts chemical and physical defenses. Queens may live decades because the society insulates them from risk. In aggregate, the superorganism converts many small, error-prone agents into a robust, adaptive whole.
To shift gears a bit, the counterfactual. If ants had no metapleural glands, would that really matter so much?
Speaking of public health at the colony scale, the metapleural gland is an antimicrobial arsenal. Its secretions suppress fungi and bacteria on workers and in nest material. Combine this with necrophoresis, with injury care observed in species such as Megaponera analis, and with targeted amputations documented in Camponotus, and you see a colony-level immune system. Remove the glands, and the remaining defenses would be overburdened, particularly in humid, microbe-rich environments.
Would their absence drastically change ant populations? Like, are we talking minor stress or a fundamental cap on how big colonies can get?
We can infer a strong constraint. Without metapleural antisepsis, large dense colonies would suffer elevated pathogen transmission and brood loss. Leafcutter agriculture, for example, already requires antibiotic-producing bacteria to protect the fungal crop. Subtract the ant's own glandular antibiotics, and the system likely collapses in the tropics. Across many lineages, we would expect smaller colonies, shorter queen longevity, narrower habitat tolerance, and reduced geographic reach. In short, fewer ants, fewer superorganisms, and an altered terrestrial ecology.
What comes to mind next is these super colonies you mentioned. Can we maybe now look at what they are and why they form?
Let's transition to another aspect. Supercolonies are vast cooperative networks spanning many nests, sometimes hundreds of kilometers, characterized by low or no aggression among workers over that expanse. Polytomy is the structural substrate. Movement of workers and food maintains cohesion. Chemically, Compatibility arises from convergent or shared cuticular hydrocarbon profiles. Argentine ants are the canonical example, although there is ongoing debate over labels, supercolony versus uncolonial. The biology remains striking.
What are the ecological consequences of supercolonies, especially in places where they are invasive?
The consequences are often severe. Such networks monopolize resources, suppress native ant faunas, and cascade effects onto arthropod communities, seed dispersal dynamics, and even plant pollination systems. With minimal internal conflict, more effort is devoted to expansion and competitive exclusion. In the red imported fire ant, which forms large networks though of a different style, we observe agricultural and health impacts via stinging and mound building. For Argentine ants, continent-scale compatibility in some regions facilitates dominance. Yet it is crucial to understand that colony boundaries and reproductive connectivity remain active research fronts.
Maybe it's just me, but the idea that chemical perfume can redraw an ecological map is both elegant and a little scary.
Elegant and accurate. Cuticular hydrocarbons are the social passport, and small shifts turn acceptance into hostility. On a lighter note, some ants have more dramatic passports. Trapjaw species close their mandibles in roughly 1/10 of a millisecond and may catapult themselves away from trouble. Others perform suicidal altruism by rupturing glands to immobilize attackers. Ants teach by tandem running, and in mangroves, some species tolerate submergence by switching to anaerobic metabolism. If you wrote this into a novel, an editor might ask you to be realistic.
So I guess that kind of sums it up. But if someone wants to read more after this, where should they look next?
To summarize, ants are eusocial Hymenoptera recognized by elbowed antennae, a petiolar waist, and metapleural glands. We considered 3 questions: how eusociality evolved via incremental cooperative steps that amplify fitness, what might happen without metapleural glands, likely smaller, sicker, and rarer colonies, and how supercolonies reshape ecosystems by reducing native diversity and rerouting energy flows. For further study, bees and wasps present illuminating contrasts and shared ancestry. Antweb and the Hymenoptera name server are excellent gateways into taxonomy and images. E.O. Wilson's writings remain foundational, as do newer phylogenomic syntheses. In conclusion, thank you for listening. Continue to observe the small, because the small constitutes much of the world. And if you drop a cookie, consider that you have just funded an experiment.
Thank you, Professor. And thanks everyone for being here today.